Hi, welcome back to the channel. My name is Jay, and I'm a historian. And this week we're finishing out a series that I started 9 weeks ago. This is part 9, where in the previous 8 parts I read out my master's thesis entitled "Maritime Strategy" or "Submarine and Maritime Strategy," which looked at how the submarine factored into the naval planning of the Royal Navy, Imperial German Navy, and the United States Navy during the first years of the 20th century leading up to World War I. And I hope you enjoyed that. I completed that 5 years ago in summer of 2020, I have done a little bit of additional research since then, but not much due to life getting in the way. But I hope now that I've actually transitioned from a full-time job in banking and transitioned into teaching positions with a local school district here, I should be able to have about, in addition to, Thanksgiving break, Christmas break, spring break, also having about a month or so every summer in which I can conduct more focused research, sometimes 2 months, depending on if I want to teach summer schools or not. And so, with that, fortunately, I do have some good stuff, and I've done some good work already, and just going to give you an update. First of all, I did mention in my conclusion last week that there were 2 weapons programs that the Navy had been working on developing over the past couple decades, the Littoral Combat Ship, or LCS program, as well as the electromagnetic railgun. So with the LCS, they were finally wrapping up that godforsaken program. And what ships they tried to convert to frigates, that did not work either. So they were just in the process of just still trying to figure out what they're going to do with him. Most of them have been decommissioned and mothballed. I would expect, though, that they're trying to just do preventative maintenance while they're being in mothballs, because should something happen and we need those ships, particularly if we get into a war in the South China Sea, as I've been continuing to analyze in my news review videos, we may need those vessels. As for the electromagnetic railgun, that program's also winding down, and the technology of the railgun itself is great. The technology on the ships to power those weapons are not there yet. It's just a matter of just getting it. They just use so much energy that the generators available on ships, especially since the Navy prefers to use gas turbine engines, basically jet engines, for powering their frigates, destroyers, cruisers, LCS, pretty much anything that's not a submarine or nuclear aircraft carrier. They just can't produce the power to generate both that much electricity through the electrical generators, but also provide the necessary horsepower to go to the shafts to propel the vessel through. So that's been shelved for the time being until they can figure out the power distribution issues. With that, as for my research itself, I have continued to explore the historiography. In fact, that's kind of also at a little bit of hole, but I'm still trying to mix in, because I also acquired a 75 to 80 book backlog during my master's work, and I've been trying to get that caught on. And that does include volumes related to the era I'm studying, and I actually actively trying in my personal book purchases only to beef up the historiography reading that I need to do. I hope to make some headway on that over the next couple of years before I do more archival research. And I did spend a couple of days at Main Archives in D.C., which honestly, I've been to both sides of the Main Archives building. On the north side is where the research room is, and the south side is where all the exhibits, and Rotunda, where the Declaration of Independence, Constitution, and all that is located. Personally, I find the research center side a lot more fun, a lot more quiet, and a lot closer to the metro station, as it's just right across the street. Anyway, what I have discovered is that And I was mainly going through the records of the Navy's General Board, which was established by the McKinley administration in 1900 as a think tank led by Admiral George Dewey after the Spanish War, just to kind of come up with ideas how to advance the new Navy, how to expand it, what they need to focus on, come up with strategy and whatnot. And a lot of their efforts, it seemed like, while they did do some inquiries on submarines and whatnot, it seemed like, at least from what I could tell in the initial days, they were, while they were okay with getting submarines, and it was more of a, oh, Congress thought these are cool, we need to have them, let's purchase them. And Navy Board's like, yeah, whatever, we'll just park them in front of our major harbors and go from there. They actually were trying to develop battleships primarily, and with that, one thing's interesting. I was able to take a lot of photos regarding it. And give me a second, I'm trying to pull up my camera roll. But there's some really interesting material. One thing I do know for certain from all that research is that at Main Archives is the Navy was totally originally planning on just until about 1907, 1908, the submarine. It was just like, oh yeah, we'll use close as fits. But after about 1907, 1908, and they transitioned like, hey, we can use these for long distance patrols off of China's coast. So they started shifting the focus from coastal submarines to what we now know as the larger, would be the predecessors of the larger fleet submarines, like the World War II era Gato and Vallejo class submarines, with the intention of then fueling up on the west coast, most likely San Francisco, San Diego, or Birmingham, Washington, with enough fuel to transit the Pacific, spend a couple weeks on station patrolling, and then transit back. Or they could deploy out of the Philippines or Guam or Hawaii. They could have even more time on stations. And they started that in about 1907, 1908, which actually is concurrent with around the time Tirpitz started introducing submarines into the Imperial German Navy, as that technology had gotten better and could sort those submarines away from the coast. Not granted, not the crazy lengths of the Pacific like the American needs, but at least get it to around the British Isles to wreak havoc. And so that I found that very fascinating. Also, another thing fascinating is I found that they had documentation be like, oh, this is where we want to focus all our defenses. And it was interesting because you would think on the East Coast that Chesapeake Bay or New York Harbor be like the two prime, like number one and number two on defense, but no, instead they chose Narragansett Bay, which is pretty much the entire non-land portion of Rhode Island, as the primary. And then on the West Coast, they favored Puget Sound over San Francisco Bay or San Diego. So that was very interesting. And I do want to try and answer that question the next time I get out to the archives. And as speaking of this, in the fall of 2025, I'm actually fortunate that the Society for Military History's annual meetings toward the end of my spring break, so I will have a few days that I'll offer to do some stuff for family, but I might sneak over to microfilm. Be like, hey, I know, let me see what I can find about that. I have not done much more research on the Germans, as it's between COVID restrictions, getting time off, and expense of getting flown out to Germany, as well as the fact that it's been years since I took German. I have to get brushed up. I just haven't had an opportunity to get to there over the seas. I do hope to do so before the end of this project, and like I said in my conclusion, thanks to the work of John Tesoro Smaida and Nicholas Lambert, there's no need to beat a dead horse with the British. That stuff's pretty solid. Most of the, like I said in the conclusion, most of the additional research needs to be on the American and German submarine developments. At this stage, being further along with the Americans, that's research. That's where I plan to put my focus. I do plan on going through a few biographies of some of the major naval players, such as Mahan and Dewey, and maybe add a couple more Teddy Roosevelt biographies into my data banks. So yeah, that's where we're at with that. If you have any suggestions for our places to find primary sources outside of main archives, the Naval War Naval War College, and the Navy's Heritage and History Command, please let me know in the comments. Because like I said, I'm definitely planning to do more research on this, and historiography, that going through that, I'll probably never get through all of it, but knowing more archives to search, that's the key, because as you can read historiography as much as and as long as you can, but at some point you got to go ahead and develop your hypothesis and then go into the primary documents and be like, okay, is this hypothesis being supported by the primary documents in the archives, or is it being thoroughly debunked, or something else, and just adjust from there? As in many ways, when it comes to writing academic history, a lot of it is very similar to the scientific method. As you go through, you do your research on what happened and what has been written about it with the historiography, and then you develop your hypothesis, and then you go to the archives to test it. So that's basically the science of doing history and the historic method. And yeah, so that's where we're at with this project. I hope you are interested in it, and if support it. And like I said, of any additional archival sources, please let me know in the comments. And I hope you enjoyed this. Please like, subscribe, and share this with someone you think would be interested. Also, in addition to just dropping archival sources, if you leave any other comments, please be kind to each other. And with that, I will see you next time. Bye-bye.